Hello to everyone, this is Karina and this is the first video in the series of video essay called AnimeDive. This is where I talk about everything you should know to fully enjoy anime and to stop being intimidated by the words like moe, shonen or otaku. We'll talk about the history of anime as well as we'll be doing a deep dive into some different anime works. Today, in our very first episode, we'll be starting from the fundamentals. We'll explore what anime really is, how it differs from Western entertainment, where its themes and narratives come from, and why any of this actually matters. Honestly, I'd call this more of a prologue, because today we'll be taking a step back to look at the entire landscape of anime as a whole. If anime were a massive painting, today we'd be looking at it from a distance, getting a full view so that the future episodes we can zoom on a specific details with context. And if you're confident you know exactly what anime is, I still think I can surprise you with few stories or insights you haven't heard before. Flashback to 1993, civil war has broken out in former Yugoslavia. Families are fleeing their homes, neighboring countries are pleading for peace. Bombs are falling on major cities. In Sarajevo, one of the cities hit hardest, a Japanese film critic named Toshio Ueno makes a visit. Toshio Ueno told this story in his book written in Japanese. There is no official English translation, but a rough title might be something like Red Metal Suit at a battlefield called anime. He walks through the rubble-stone streets and spots a house partially destroyed by an explosion. One of its outer walls still stands, divided into three parts. On the first, a portrait of Mao Zedong. The second features a slogan from a local radical political group, but it's the third panel that leaves the director speechless. There, painted across the cracked concrete, it's a scene from anime Akira. Amidst the ruins, the teenage anti-hero Karina stands tall and says, "So, it's begun." Why am I telling you this story? Because to this day, a lot of people, including friends of mine, still think of anime as just cartoons, something made only for kids. But let's be honest, would a typical children's cartoon end up painted on a war-torn wall? Would a light-hearted animated show ever be used as a political symbol in the middle of the country at a war? Sounds kind of ridiculous, doesn't it? Even if we rewind things all the way back to the year 1907, that's when the very first, well, let's call it anime for now, even though this term didn't really exist yet, made its appearance. It was a short piece called Katsudo Shoshin. Now, this wasn't some cheerful cartoon for kids. It was a tiny little clip, just about 4 seconds long. And you can still find it, by the way, on the Wikipedia page for the history of anime. In this video, there is this boy who draws a few kanji characters, the ones that mean moving pictures. It was the phrase that people used back then to talk about the film before the word cinema or film really caught on. Then the boy turns to face us, tips his hat and gives a polite little bow. Now, think about it for a moment. That's a classic example of what's so-called breaking the fourth wall, when a character in a film acknowledges the audience and shows that they know that they are part of the story. It's a clever little meta moment, and honestly, it's a kind of trick that tends to land more with grown-ups than with children, although not always, of course. But the point is that from the very beginning, anime wasn't just for kids. Anime always been a pretty wide-reaching form of storytelling. Yeah, sure, there are plenty of shows and films made specifically for children, but there is also a huge portion of anime created for teens and even more aimed squarely at adults. These days, animation isn't just some niche, it's at the very heart of the Japanese film industry. Every year, Japan produces dozens, sometimes even hundreds of anime series, plus another handful of the full-length feature films. And get this, those films, they account for nearly half of the box office revenue in Japan. Huh? That's wild, even if you think about it. I mean, over here in our mass culture, everyone watches like Netflix shows or big Hollywood blockbusters. But in Japan, just like that, everyone watches anime. In the upcoming episodes, we'll break down all the different genres of the anime. You'll start to see how the entire medium manages to speak to so many different people, from toddlers to all the way to the 60-year-old office workers. But for now, let's go over a few more basics just to get properly grounded. So when we say anime, well, we could actually be talking about a few different things. We might mean animation that's made in Japan, or we could be talking about a certain visual style, a particular look. Now, here's something not everyone knows. In Japan, the word anime is used for pretty much any animation. Disney films, Pixar, 3D stuff, all of it falls under anime over there. But the moment this word started being used outside Japan, in English, in Italian, in French, you name it, and it's begun to take on a whole different level, on a whole different meaning. For a long time, anime was simply understood as Japanese animation, and funnily enough, there were certain things most anime had in common. A recognizable style you didn't often see elsewhere, and if someone outside Japan did use that style, it was usually a very conscious choice. But over time, even that definition started to shift. It used to be anime meant only animation produced in Japan, but these days, that views begin to feel a bit outdated. Japanese studios now frequently collaborate with others overseas. Sometimes it's for the things like 3D modeling or background artwork, often handled by the teams in China or South Korea because it's cheaper there. And on the flip side, you've got Western studios inviting Japanese directors and animators to co-create projects outside of Japan. To the average viewer, these shows still looks like anime, and in many ways, they are. Take something like the Animatrix, for example. It's a mix of shorts, some made by Japanese teams, others in collaboration with American animators. And honestly, unless you really know your stuff, it's hard to tell which is which. Or think about the Avatar: The Last Airbender. That's a Western series through and through, but it wears its anime and East Asian influences right on its sleeve. So naturally, a lot of people see it go, oh, that's anime, especially if they're not particularly deep into the fandom. Which brings us to where we are now. These days, anime doesn't just refer to shows made in Japan. It's come to include all sorts of animated series and films that feel similar in style, tone, or storytelling, especially if there were actual Japanese creators involved. But that leads us to the next big question. What does similar in style actually mean? If anime isn't just defined by geography anymore, then how do we know that we are looking at it? Let's have a go at figuring that out by picking out a few key things that tend to make anime, well, anime. Right then, from the tragic events in former Yugoslavia, we're now heading even further back in time to something frankly even darker, the Second World War. It's 1944, and there's this 16-year-old boy called Osamu. He gets drafted, but thankfully not into the army. Instead, they send him off to work in a slate factory. As you probably know, Japan suffered a devastating loss in the war, and the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki left those cities practically wiped off the map. For the next 15 years or so, Japan focused on rebuilding its economy, its cities, and its cultural identity. During that time, America was flooding the country not just with aid, supplies, but also with content, films, TV shows, cartoons, comics, and the young Osamu, who was studying at the medical university back then, was absolutely captivated, especially by cartoons. He loved them. He even started dreaming of making animation himself, but post-war Japan wasn't exactly bursting with animation studios or career paths in arts. So, despite finishing his medical degree, Osamu decided to take on a completely different path. He became a mangaka, a manga artist. And yes, we will definitely be talking more about manga a bit later. He fudged his age a little bit on an application, packed up and left Osaka, where there were basically zero perspectives at the time, and moved to Tokyo, the capital of Japan. And you know what? It worked. He quickly made a name for himself, especially among kids and teenagers. At first, he created his own original stories, but he also adapted some of the very cartoons that had inspired him as a boy, like Bambi or Pinocchio, turning them into Japanese-style comics. Though, to be fair, he wasn't too fond of doing the adaptations. By the early 1960s, things were beginning to shift. Japanese households were starting to get their first black and white televisions. And with them came a wave of important American TV shows and cartoons. These were way more popular than the homegrown Japanese stuff. Osamu wanted to change that, so he set up his own animation studio called Mushi Productions. Now, it wasn't the very first anime studio, but it was one of the earliest to truly help to shape the industry. Even though Japan's economy was slowly bouncing back by the 60s and the 70s, anime still wasn't seen as the moneymaker. Studios had to cut corners just to survive. Budgets were tight, and making full animation frame by frame was incredibly expensive. So one of the little tricks animators used at that time was to lower the frame rate. And actually, let's chat about that, what it means, because it's really important for understanding anime style. So normally, when you're watching something on the telly or in the cinema, what you're seeing is a smooth image made up of 24 frames per second. Just for reference, video games usually run at about 30 frames per second, TV programs usually run at 25, in most films and traditional animation, 24 frames per second. Well, 24 frames per second, that's 24 individual images, flashing by every second, fast enough to trick your brain into seeing smooth movement. But in areas where speed really matters, like action-heavy video games, they crank the frame rate up to 30 or even 60 frames per second to make everything feel sleek, responsive, and seamless. Now, here's the thing, if anime were animated at that level of detail, 24 or even 30 frames per second throughout, it would be insanely expensive and time-consuming to make, especially back in the 60s and 70s, where money and resources were super limited. Just imagine, for every single second of animation, you need to draw 24 separate images by hand, so studios had to get clever. There was one studio, Toei Animation, that pioneered a trick called limited animation. Basically, in calm and dialogue-heavy scenes, like when characters just talking, walking, or there is a wild shot of the environment, they'd reduce the frame rate down to 12, 8, or even sometimes 6 frames per second. It meant that they had to draw a way fewer images, which saved both time and money. But here's the genius bit. When it came to the action scenes, battles, explosion, and emotionally intense moments, they'd go all in, the frame rate would jump up, again sometimes to the full 24 or even more frames per second. And this is what led to what's known the Sakuga effect. That's when the animators pour all their energy and skill into the very specific scenes, brief, high-impact moments where the quality spikes dramatically, and it's still used today, even though the anime industry now has lots of money behind it. Why? Well, because there are so many shows and films being made these days, and time is still tight. So this approach, putting more effort into the key moments, just makes sense. That's why a lot of anime might look a bit choppy or stiff to someone who's used to the Western cartoons or live-action films, but honestly, all it takes is watching a few episodes and your brain adjusts to the rhythm of it. It starts to feel natural, and once that happens, those Sakuga moments, they feel amazing. You really notice when the animation suddenly gets smoother, more vibrant, more explosive. It's kind of like visual adrenaline rush, and your brain loves it. Another clever trick studios used, especially in the 60s and 70s, was simplifying the way characters looked. That came from Osamu Tezuka studio, Mushi Productions, and one of their most iconic series was Astro Boy. If you look at it, the characters are made up of basic shapes, circles, ovals, rectangles. They're clean and simple, which made them much easier and quicker to animate. A lot of people still think Astro Boy was the first anime. And well, that's not quite true. There were other anime series and films before Astro Boy, but it's definitely caused a massive splash, first in Japan and then in the West as well. It even aired to the US, which was a huge deal at that time. Let's go back to the idea of simplification for a moment. It wasn't just the characters' bodies that were simplified, their faces were too. See, animators had to figure out how to show a wide range of emotions while spending as little time and money as possible. And that's where Osamu Tezuka's little genius formula came in. Massive eyes, perfect for expressing lots of feelings, a nose that's often just a dot or a couple of lines, and a simple mouth outline, no lips, no fuzzy details. That style became the blueprint for generations of anime artists. Astro Boy was such a massive hit that it helped to shape the entire visual language of what we now think as anime. So yeah, the same 16-year-old Osamu, who once worked at the slave factory during the war, ended up becoming so influential as both a manga artist and animator that people started calling him the god of manga. Now, anime characters don't really look that simple anymore. Clothing today is often drawn with lots of details, and the way characters move, their gestures, their body language is often much more realistic than at that time. Not in every anime, of course, but in lots of modern shows. But when it comes to faces, that classic, recognizable anime look is still very much alive. Big expressive eyes, minimal noses, simple mouths. It's part of the charm, really. Sure, there are exceptions. Some shows lean more toward the Western cartoon style, a bit more minimal. Others go in the opposite way with ultra-detailed, almost photorealistic designs, but even then, you can usually spot some anime DNA somewhere in there. One thing for sure, though, Tezuka definitely achieved what he set out to do. By creating a fresh new style of animation, he helped make Japanese-made anime more beloved at home than any Western cartoon at the time, and he basically laid the foundation of how anime looks even today. Right, let's jump back to the present day for a moment. So, for over a decade now, we've had Marvel Cinematic Universe on a big screen, Spider-Man, the Avengers, Thor, Iron Man, all that superhero goodness. I'm sure you've seen at least a few. Now, imagine this. You just walked out of the cinema after watching the latest Marvel film. You're buzzing from the action, maybe a little snacky from the popcorn, and then, boom, in the post-credits scene, there's this cheeky little teaser, a glance at the new hero, the new villain, or even maybe a hint of what's coming next. So, what do? Well, technically, you could wait a couple of years for the sequels to come out, but let's be real, we're not exactly the most patient people, are we? So you start thinking, hand on, maybe I can outsmart the system, and then it hits you, I'll just go and read comics. That way, I'll know what happens before everyone else. Sounds clever, right? So off you go into the bookshop or a specialist comic store, feeling very smug and future savvy. You stroll up to the counter and say, oh yeah, I'd like the continuation of the latest Marvel film, please. And then the person behind the counter just kind of stares at you. Maybe they scratch their head a bit, and if you're lucky, they'll point you toward 5 different storylines, all slightly related, none quite what you expected. If you're unlucky, they'll just tell you flat out, yeah mate, those doesn't actually exist. Why? Because this is where it gets a bit mad. Marvel characters don't really have one single story. There is no clear beginning, no definitive ending. And no single author tying it all together. Every comic writer who works with these heroes, they should have reinterpreted them in their own way. They reboot their backstories, tweak their personalities, and tell totally different versions of their lives. So instead of one clean connected timeline, you get a giant tangled web of alternative universes. What ifs, reboots, and crossovers. Even in Marvel films, you already had multiple Spider-Man, completely different ones, with totally different origin stories. That kind of approach, like Marvel, lets you tell stories about the same characters over and over again for literally decades. You can keep reinventing them, give them fresh outfits, drop them into the new settings, maybe even retell the same story just with a different vibe. But here's the catch. After a while, you get no idea where to even start. Like, which Spider-Man do you read? Where is the beginning and where's the end? It's just all over the place, really. In anime, it's actually completely opposite. Take Naruto, for example. There are 700 episodes. Yeah, 700. Way more than any single Spider-Man cartoon. Actually, probably more than all the Spider-Man cartoons combined. Like cartoon series, cartoon TV shows. But here's the key difference. With Naruto, there is exactly one story, one beginning and one ending, and one creator, Masashi Kishimoto. He came up with the whole idea and drew it himself too, because, and this is important, most anime actually start out as manga. That's Japan's version of comic books. Now, manga usually in black and white, and you read it right to left, which takes a minute to get used to. But once you're in, it's addictive in the best way. And there's the thing, Japan is obsessed with manga. By some estimates, around 90 or 95% of the population reads it regularly. They buy volumes. They subscribe to a weekly magazine. It's not just for teenagers, it's a proper part of everyday life of almost every single Japanese person. Manga isn't just some niche hobby, it's massive. They print numbers alone would make the most European publishers weep with envy. And the whole manga industry is set up to generate tons of fresh, creative, original stories for all sorts of people. Whatever you're into, there's probably a manga for it. Now, let's have a little think together. How many barriers or hurdles really do you reckon a story has to go through before it actually gets turned into an anime? Let's count them, shall we? Right then, let's say you've made your own manga. You want it to get published. Well, first hurdle, you've got to win a newcomers competition. That's barrier number one. Then, if you're lucky, someone at the magazine takes notice. They might invite you to join one of the big weekly or monthly manga magazines and ask you to come up with something completely new. Fresh story, fresh characters. Now, if that new piece actually impresses the editors, that's your second barrier. Only then will your work be included in the journal. A chunky 100 to 200 page book, alongside lots of other series, many of which are already more popular and well established. And now comes the third barrier. The readers. If your story manages to stand out and really grab people, they'll ask you to keep it going. Congrats, you're serialized. But now, the real grind kicks in. You've got to survive near 18-hour workdays, crank out new chapters on a regular schedule, and somehow not sleep up. Not with the plot, not with the artwork. If you manage to keep that up, here comes barrier number 4. Your chapter will be collected in a proper books called tankobon. It's an independent standalone book. They're like paper volumes but thicker. Now here it comes the barrier number 5. Those tankobon actually have to sell. People have to go into the shops, pick them up and think, yep, I want to keep reading this. And finally, the barrier number 6. Among the mountains of manga being published, an anime studio has to notice your story of all things and think, yeah, that could make a great series, let's adapt it. And in total, you're taking 6 brutal barriers. Some come down to expert opinion, editors, publish, magazine staff, others depend entirely on the audience. readers voting with their wallets. Only if you make it through all that, only then might your story become an anime. And even then, there's absolutely no guarantee it'll be smash hit like Naruto. This selection process, it's happening all the time, constantly. New manga is always arriving, and only a tiny fraction makes it through. And if your story flops, that's it. No one's going to pick it up and finish it for you. No one's going to rescue your characters. The industry just moves on, full speed ahead, and your little world gets quickly left behind. So yeah, when it comes to manga, things like spin-offs, prequels, or sequels, or reboots, they're a real luxury. Only a handful of well-established creators can actually get away with doing them, which is exactly why the anime world, stuff like that, is pretty rare. Take Naruto for example. It does have a follow-up called Boruto, which is all about the next generation, their kids, and so on. But let's be honest, it never really hit the same heights in terms of popularity, did it? Because no one wants to read a thick weekly manga magazine where every story feels like the last one, just with slightly different haircuts. Now, sure, there are exceptions, big name or experimental anime studios sometimes play by their own rules. Directors like Makoto Shinkai, Hayao Miyazaki or Satoshi Kon often write their own scripts, building stories from scratch, and that's exactly what makes their stories stand out. So unique, so personal. Meanwhile, over in Hollywood, you've got this constant cycle of nostalgia, remakes, reboots, sequels to things like from 30 years ago. Tightly controlled industry standards, rigid story formulas, and a lot of pressure on screenwriters, whereas manga and anime, along with it, are always pushing to find something new, a new theme, a new visual style, a fresh way to tell a story that'll really grab someone and stand out. Among other stories on page, on screen, it's basically a never-ending creative search, and that's what gives anime its spark, its originality, so much that even filmmakers like Nolan have borrowed ideas from anime for their own films. So let's sum up all that up in one sentence. Anime is Japanese, though not exclusively Japanese animation, created in a specific visual style, a style that's often defined by things like limited animation frames and very expressive stylish faces. That's not everything that defines it, but those are the big ones. Most anime is based on manga, Japanese comics, or light novels with illustrations. And yes, we said there are definitely original, fully author-driven stories too, and anime it's absolutely not just for kids, or maybe it's more accurate to say it's not only for kids, not even close. Anime has become a massive source of inspiration for people all over the world. And in the future episodes of AnimeDive, we'll be doing a deep dive into how anime does that, what tools and techniques it uses to tell amazing stories, and how it all manages to inspire so many people in the process. What was the anime or manga that started it all for you? The one that really got you into? Maybe you just stumbled across it, or a mate recommended it to you. Let us know your first steps into Japanese animation in anime. I'd love to hear your stories. It was Karina here with you. Bye! Others overseas, sometimes it's for the things like 3D modeling or background artwork, often handled by the teams in China or South Korea because it's cheaper there. And on the flip side, you've got Western cities in the